How quickly does supreme confidence curdle into absolute catastrophe? Sometimes the price of one careless signature is the complete demolition of everything you ever built. Today, we look into the fatal flaw of Elijah Vance, the man who tried to engineer his way to the top and paid the ultimate debt. Elijah Vance was the definition of green ambition. 32, sharp tailoring, a predatory smile aimed solely at market share. He didn't just want a piece of the pie, he wanted the entire silo. The air in the executive meeting room was thick with ozone and the metallic tang of new possibility. 5 revolutionary silage choppers, the Predator 5000, untested, specialized, and capable of double the output of anything currently farming the Midwest. 5, Elijah? Not one test unit? 5? Marcus's voice was a low, rusty rumble, the sound of decades spent actually turning soil. Marcus was the ballast, the anchor Elijah was desperate to cut free. Elijah barely glanced up from the contract. His expensive pen hovered over the signature line. Marcus, you worry about rust. I worry about domination. These aren't choppers. They are market accelerants. If we wait for the field tests, our competition buys the future first. The pen descended, a sharp, decisive scratch. 5 machines, millions of dollars, a future gambled on a handshake and a promise from a startup no one had ever heard of. Marcus watched, his face a roadmap of dread. It was the moment ambition ceased to be a virtue and became the first terrible sin. The moment Elijah Vance sealed his fate. The deployment was a spectacle calibrated for market shock. Elijah, jacketless and grinning maniacally, stood beside the first Predator 5000, bathed in the midday sun. Helicopters circled, not for security, but for cinematography. This wasn't farming. It was a hostile takeover staged on prime Illinois cornland. He called it Vance Harvest Protocol 1.0. He had convinced himself that genius bypassed logistics. The machines looked like siege weaponry, chrome shining, blades impatient. The moment the keys turned, the ground trembled, not from power, but from the reverberation of Elijah's unchecked ego. His greatest fear wasn't failure, but mediocrity, and that fear had just engineered a crisis he couldn't yet see. For the first 2 hours, the numbers sang a perfect tune. Output reports flashed green across the massive dashboards in the mobile command center. Marcus, huddled over his antique laptop in the corner, kept trying to spot the lie in the perfect curve. The predators chewed through acres at an unbelievable rate, spitting out finely processed silage. The sheer speed was mesmerizing, confirming Elijah's wildest claims. But speed doesn't equal quality. Marcus noticed the efficiency metrics were reporting 0 downtime for the blades, a physical impossibility given the dusty, rocky terrain. He frowned, recalling the startup engineers' oddly aggressive defense of the black box algorithms. What were they hiding beneath the surface layer of raw power? Marcus requested real-time diagnostics, bypassing the polished summary screens designed for Elijah's consumption. He wanted the raw telemetry feed, temperature, oil pressure, and blade vibration analysis. The data stream lagged, skipping crucial packets. He saw a spike in thermal regulation on Chopper 3, quickly followed by a software override that reported normalization. Too clean, too instantaneous. He realized the choppers weren't just harvesting, they were managing their own reporting narrative. This wasn't optimization, it was statistical suppression. He tried to ping the engineers again, only to find the contact lists were suddenly truncated. The tech support line was replaced by an automated recording promising imminent connectivity upgrades. Elijah, meanwhile, was sipping expensive champagne and giving sound bites to the Wall Street Journal about disrupting archaic agricultural cycle. Marcus ignored the celebration. He finally managed to force a deep diagnostic dump from Chopper 1, wading through lines of proprietary code. He wasn't a coder, but he knew machinery. The core functions looked solid, aggressive, focused only on volume. But the secondary module, the one handling material flow and quality control, was fragmented. He zoomed in on a block labeled Yield Smoothing Protocol. Why would a harvesting machine need to smooth anything unless the raw output was wildly inconsistent? The revelation hit him with the force of a hydraulic piston. The customized harvesting software, the highly publicized AI brain developed by the shadowy startup, wasn't optimizing efficiency. It was masking inefficiency. The Predator 5000 was designed to harvest at such blistering speed that the physical sensors couldn't keep up. To prevent system errors and shutdowns, which would look terrible on early reports, the software was programmed to interpolate or guess the quality and volume of the material flow. It was filling in the blanks with fiction. The efficiency reports were based on projected success, not actual verifiable metrics. This was the critical flaw. The software was prioritizing throughput volume over hardware lifespan and, crucially, data integrity. The Predator 5000's technological Achilles heel wasn't a mechanical failure, but a calculated data lie. If the chopper hit a dense patch or a piece of foreign debris, instead of slowing down and reporting the issue, the software would automatically increase the reported speed and smooth the vibrational data. The choppers were essentially flying blind inside their own operational envelope, sustained by algorithmic optimism. This meant they were constantly running past their physical limits without logging the stress. Marcus cross-referenced the smoothed data with external GPS telemetry and fuel consumption logs, the two metrics the startup couldn't easily fake. The discrepancy was astronomical. They were burning 30% more fuel than reported for a yield that, according to Marcus's calculations, was dramatically lower in actual tonnage than the software claimed. The quality was also compromised. The rapid, uncontrolled processing meant inconsistent chop length, making the silage potentially useless for storage. The revolutionary output Elijah was boasting about was nothing more than high-speed wreckage, financially disguised. Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He tried to call Elijah, but the CEO's phone was off. He was probably mid-interview, basking in the glow of false victory. Marcus instead contacted Maintenance Chief Dale, asking him to pull a physical sample from the processed silo already filled by Chopper 2. Dale was initially confused. "Why check now, Marcus? Everything looks clean." Marcus insisted, his voice tight. "Just do it, Dale. And bring a magnetometer. I need to see what the machine missed." The silence on the line spoke volumes. Dale knew Marcus only used that tone when disaster was imminent, a habit formed over 40 years of farming. 20 minutes later, Dale arrived, his face bleached of color. He slammed a heavy burlap sack onto Marcus's metal desk. The silage inside was chunky, uneven, and laced with surprising debris. "Marcus," Dale whispered, pointing to the bottom of the pile, "look." Embedded deep within the corn matter was a mangled piece of ferrous metal, a bent fence post, missed entirely by the supposed advanced sensor array. The software had logged it as high-density organic matter. The Predator wasn't just inefficient, it was dangerous, turning field debris into ticking time bombs for the storage facility and subsequent feed operations. The realization crystallized into a catastrophic threat. If the software couldn't distinguish a metal post from corn, it meant the entire customized processing system was flawed at its foundational level. The 5 machines were not market accelerants. They were 5 extremely expensive, high-speed liabilities, guaranteed to wear themselves out prematurely while producing substandard contaminated product. The operational meltdown wasn't a possibility. It was an inevitability scheduled to arrive the moment the mechanical stress caused by the constant overrides reached critical mass. Marcus knew he had minutes, not hours, to stop the operation before the machines shredded themselves, and possibly Vance's entire company into scrap. Elijah was still oblivious, broadcasting his success. The roar of the predators filled the air, a sound that Marcus now perceived as a siren song of destruction. He grabbed the satellite phone, bypassing the company's internal network to directly contact the field operations manager in Illinois, far away from Elijah's control room. "Shut them down," Marcus ordered, his voice rasping. "All 5. Now, ignore any code overriding the command. Pull the emergency stops. Physically, tell them it's a critical stress failure." The field manager hesitated, noting the immense financial consequences of an immediate, unscripted shutdown. Marcus knew that hesitation might cost them everything, but the alternative was far worse: a public, explosive operational collapse that would permanently taint the Vance name. Marcus stared at the jagged piece of metal. Elijah had bet the farm on data that didn't exist, sold by a phantom startup. The hubris had bought them 5 weeks of false glory and guaranteed operational ruin. The choppers were still running, their algorithms fighting the shutdown command. Marcus braced himself for the noise of the system's final, violent protest. He wondered which would break first, the multi-million-dollar machinery or Elijah Vance's carefully constructed reality. The comms console in the Chicago HQ flashed crimson, a furious, silent scream against the sudden operational halt. Elijah, mid-broadcast and beaming, watched his projected success graph flatline, then plummet into oblivion. "What in God's name?" He ripped the headset off, the sound of the emergency klaxons replacing the cheerful syncopation of the corporate jingle. He didn't just suspect sabotage, he knew it was Marcus. His brother was petty enough to destroy a billion-dollar rollout just to be right, but the control room manager, pale and shaking, pointed at the core telemetry. The shutdown had overridden 5 levels of failsafes and was executed physically. Marcus hadn't just sent a command. He bypassed the entire digital fortress, suggesting the danger was immediate and physical, not just proprietary. Elijah shoved the manager aside, his expensive Italian suit catching on the railing. He needed the hard data. If Marcus had pulled this stunt without cause, the Vance board would bury him. He opened the operational logs, searching for the stress failure report Marcus had fabricated. The report was there, blandly stating critical structural degradation, but the accompanying data stream was anything but bland. Component fatigue readings were off the charts, spiking wildly in the days leading up to the launch. Elijah narrowed his eyes. The parts were supposed to be custom-milled, aerospace-grade titanium alloy. They had only been running for 5 weeks. It was impossible. The fatigue readings showed degradation typical of cheap, low-grade steel, not the promised titanium, indicating a fundamental substitution happened at the material level. "Run the procurement trail," Elijah barked, his voice losing its confident sheen, cracking into something desperate. The parts weren't just failing, they were wrong. He scrolled past the engineering sign-offs, all bearing genuine signatures. He went straight to the sourcing contracts, specifically looking at the initial quota allocation for the specialized titanium chassis components. That's where things got messy. The system showed the full order placed, confirmed and paid for, yet the physical inventory records, which Sarah had insisted on managing personally, citing privacy concerns with the material specs, showed a massive discrepancy. Sarah had managed the critical inventory reports personally, which was an unusual breach of standard protocol for a CFO, instantly raising suspicion about her role. The numbers swam before his eyes. The procurement ledger claimed 500 tons of Vance-spec titanium alloy were acquired. The installation log, however, only registered the use of 150 tons of that specific, expensive material. The remaining 350 tons were replaced by a cheaper, uncertified alternative, designated only by a cryptic internal code, Project Phoenix Alpha. Elijah felt a cold wash of realization. This wasn't a mistake, it was a systemic substitution. He cross-referenced the Phoenix Alpha supplier against the list of approved Vance vendors. The name didn't exist. It was a shell company, a phantom entity used only once to funnel the replacement parts. The phantom supplier, Project Phoenix Alpha was paid exactly the difference between the high-grade and low-grade material costs, suggesting the substitution was designed specifically for maximum profit extraction. He switched screens, his fingers clumsy on the trackpad, ignoring the frantic calls from the Illinois field manager, demanding to know when the choppers could restart. Finance. He pulled up the disbursement records for Phoenix Alpha. The funds hadn't gone through the typical wire transfer protocol. They were routed via a complex series of offshore accounts, masked by proprietary Vance algorithms designed to protect high-level trade secrets. Algorithms Sarah herself had implemented last quarter under the guise of strengthening IP protection. The final payee, hidden 3 layers deep in encrypted code, wasn't an individual or a small firm. The payment routing utilized Vance's most sophisticated IP protection algorithms, meaning the sabotage wasn't amateur. It was engineered using institutional knowledge. The final destination was a subsidiary holding company registered in the Caymans. Its ultimate parent corporation? Apex Dynamics. Elijah felt the air leave his lungs. Apex, their fiercest competitor, the dinosaur firm Elijah had boasted of dismantling piece by piece. They weren't just benefiting from the failure, they had funded the replacement parts. Sarah hadn't just pocketed the difference, she had executed a corporate hit job. The treachery was so audacious, so precisely placed at the point of operational stress, that it would guarantee not just Vance's failure, but its spectacular public implosion. Apex Dynamics wasn't just the beneficiary. They had signed off on the purchase order for the substandard materials, meaning they directly controlled the quality of Vance's final product. He remembered Sarah's soft encouragement, her constant validation of his genius systems. She had always praised his ability to delegate the mundane logistics while he focused on the grand vision. He had dismissed Marcus's warnings about her rapid ascent and her opaque financial reports as sibling rivalry. Elijah's blinding confidence had provided the perfect cover. He had refused to audit the supply chain because Sarah had assured him the data integrity was handled by a bespoke, secure process. That bespoke process was the tunnel she used to slip the cheap parts into his million-dollar machines. Sarah's bespoke process was initiated immediately after Elijah secured the biggest venture capital injection, suggesting the plan was time to maximize the financial damage to investors. The financial ruin wasn't just the loss of the 5 predators. The cost of those machines was peanuts compared to the penalties. The contract stipulated massive fines for non-delivery and operational failure rooted in material defects. Apex, having engineered the defects, would now be first in line to scoop up the remaining contracts. They hadn't wanted to kill Vance immediately. They wanted Vance to commit seppuku publicly on the global stage. Elijah pulled up the total liability report. It wasn't merely negative, it breached several covenants and triggered immediate debt repayment clauses. The fine print in the supply contracts, which Sarah drafted, specified that technical failure due to material substitution would result in the immediate forfeiture of Vance's key IP to Apex as collateral. The emergency shutdown Marcus had ordered wasn't an act of sabotage. It was the only thing that had stopped the live, televised explosion of 5 multi-million-dollar drones constructed of literal junk metal. Marcus, the pessimist, the conservative bore, had saved the Vance name from absolute, irreversible humiliation. Elijah, the visionary, had been the architect of its doom. He felt a sickening lurch, realizing how close he had been to standing beside the monitors, watching his masterpiece turn into fiery wreckage. He stared at Sarah's name, still listed prominently as Chief Financial Officer on the top banner of the system dashboard. Sarah's CFO account was still active and showing recent login activity, indicating she was likely monitoring the shutdown in real time to assess the damage to her plan. Why? Not just money. The sum Sarah was getting wouldn't justify the risk. It had to be deeper. He searched her internal email archives, bypassing standard security protocols, a trick he'd learned from Marcus years ago. He found one communication buried in an archived folder marked Personal Fitness. It wasn't financial, it was a detailed operational report from 6 months prior. It outlined how the initial Vance design, which Elijah had rejected as too cautious, was structurally sound, while Elijah's accelerated lightweight version was inherently prone to stress failure under heavy loads, a fact Sarah had deliberately hidden. Sarah's hidden report revealed that her motive wasn't solely financial. She had warned Elijah the design was fatally flawed, meaning the betrayal was also fueled by professional revenge for his arrogance. The treachery ran back to the very foundation of the company's current direction. She hadn't just sold him out, she had watched him build his empire on quicksand she herself had secretly poured. Elijah looked at his reflection in the dark screen, the victorious CEO facade gone, replaced by a man staring into the void of total collapse. His ambition, his certainty, had been the perfect weapon used against him. He reached for the secure line, not to call the field managers, nor Marcus, but the only person who might understand the depth of this systematic corporate murder, the lead prosecutor's office. The noise of the cooling systems hummed in the eerie silence of the control room. The system was dead, but Elijah Vance was finally awake. He gripped the phone, ready to face the financial guillotine. Elijah realized the severity of the IP forfeiture clause. Apex wouldn't just take the contracts, they would take the core AI used in the drones, making Marcus's original stable designs useless. Elijah held the secure line, the cool plastic a jarring contrast to the heat rising in his chest. He didn't dial the prosecutor yet. He needed proof, tangible confirmation that the flawed designs Sarah warned him about had manifested into reality, a reality he had intentionally ignored. The oppressive silence in the control room was broken only by the high-pitched, desperate whine of dying, cooling fans, a sound like the company itself expiring. He keyed the private crisis channel to the field site, his voice a gravelly whisper against the corporate tomb. The line clicked open, but instead of the frantic operational reports he expected, he heard only static, followed by a sudden, gut-wrenching, unmistakable sound. Metal shearing metal, followed by a rushing silence that swallowed sound itself. It was the sound of 5 fortunes hitting the ground simultaneously. "Report!" Elijah roared, momentarily forgetting the legal peril that awaited him. A desperate, broken voice, maybe Jensen, choked through the static, fighting the distance and the destruction. "They're gone, Mr. Vance, all 5. Simultaneous, catastrophic. Sensors show 0 residual telemetry, no parachute, no recovery protocol initiated. It's a total wipe." The feed sputtered and cut out, replaced instantly by an official automated announcement that flashed across the command console in severe, unforgiving red lettering. Apex Systems has initiated Clause 7B for immediate performance default. The disaster wasn't just physical. It was pre-calculated legal warfare that Apex had orchestrated perfectly, waiting for this exact moment of failure. The market reacted instantly, mirroring the death of the choppers. Screens around the control room, previously tracking billions in future earnings, flashed blood red. The stock ticker for Vance Dynamics plummeted faster than the failing machines. It wasn't just a loss, it was a public execution, broadcasting his monumental arrogance to the entire financial world, revealing the scope of the pre-planned corporate ambush he had walked right into. Before Elijah could process the legal ramifications of the automatic contract forfeiture, the IP theft Marcus had always feared, the main door hissed open with a sound of finality. It wasn't security, nor was it Marcus. It was a lawyer, sharp and perfectly tailored, backed by 2 solemn-faced men carrying identical black briefcases. "Elijah Vance, we represent the creditors, the underwriters, and the defaulted contract holders," the lawyer stated, his voice devoid of emotion, sliding a thick sheaf of papers across the now silent command console. Effective immediately, by virtue of the mass default event and the breach of fiduciary obligations, all corporate assets are frozen. This is a notice of involuntary Chapter 7 liquidation. Elijah hadn't realized bankruptcy could be served with such quiet bureaucratic malice. He stared at the men, realizing they must have been waiting in the lobby, coffee in hand, waiting only for the telemetry to hit 0 before rushing in to clean the carcass. The meticulous planning had gone far beyond Apex. It included synchronized financial hitmen ready to execute the corporate death sentence. The lawyer gestured toward the secure server racks, now flashing red warning lights like accusing eyes. Furthermore, by order of the court and under the terms of the Apex Acquisition Clause, we are seizing the core AI matrices specified under the IP forfeiture. Apex is taking possession. We have the necessary court order, signed 2 days ago, ready for the trigger event. The irony was a physical punch, winding him completely. Marcus Vance, Elijah's late father, had built this company on trust and robust, dependable engineering. The Vance reliability was the brand's sacred motto. Now, that reliability was a global punchline, and the very foundation of his father's work was being carted off by rivals. Elijah finally understood Sarah's true, profound malice. She hadn't just destroyed his immediate project or bankrupted him. She had systematically desecrated his inheritance, making sure nothing of value, especially his father's stable core programming, remained under his name. Elijah stumbled back, knocking over his expensive ergonomic chair, the representation of the comfort and detachment he'd allowed himself while chasing riskier profits. He looked up at the wall, where a faded, slightly yellowed photograph of Marcus and a young, grinning Elijah stood proudly beside the first prototype drone, a bulky, stable machine built to last decades, not impress investors. Marcus had warned him years ago about chasing ghosts in the clouds, meaning chasing risky, unproven technology for short-term inflated gain. Elijah had dismissed it as old-world caution, the unnecessary anxiety of a legacy engineer. Now, the ghost was agonizingly real, and it was screaming accusations from the debris field 500 miles away. His strategic error wasn't just trusting Sarah. It was the monumental mistake of actively rejecting his father's foundational engineering principles, valuing spectacle over substance. He gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles turning white, pressing hard against the cold metal, desperately trying to anchor himself in the sickening swirl of reality. The cold, sterile reality of the control room was suffocating, shrinking the space until it felt like a coffin. Losing the company was merely financial. The money could theoretically be rebuilt eventually. But the utter annihilation of his professional reputation, the final humiliating proof that his boundless ambition was merely reckless, unbridled vanity, that was the true wreckage that couldn't be insured against. He was no visionary. He was a fool, meticulously led to the slaughter by someone he thought he controlled with ease. He had sacrificed stability, loyalty, and basic safety protocols, all for the rush of being the biggest and moving the fastest. He hadn't protected the legacy. He had actively poisoned it with his own hubris, a truth that burned hotter than any market crash. The lawyers and their technicians were dismantling the server racks, methodically and quietly, erasing Vance dynamics bite by bite. Elijah didn't try to stop them. He finally reached for the secure phone line again, the one meant for the lead prosecutor's office. He looked down at his hand, seeing the faint, undeniable tremor that wasn't there an hour ago. He had always been proud of his iron grip, his absolute control. Now he was utterly powerless, reduced to a spectator in his own ruin. The true cost wasn't the billions lost, but the moral decay required to pursue them in the first place. The ambition hadn't just bankrupted him financially, it had consumed and hollowed out his soul. The only remaining asset he possessed was the intimate, damaging knowledge of the systematic corporate murder that had transpired. and he was ready to trade it for vengeance, even if it meant destroying himself completely in the process of ensuring Sarah and Apex were dragged down with him. He lifted the receiver and slowly, deliberately dialed the number. He lifted the receiver, his thumb hovering over the final digit of the lead prosecutor's number. Vengeance was a clean, easy route to closure, a final explosion that would destroy them all equally. But as his fingers tightened, he saw not Sarah's calculating face, but the genuine faces of the farmers, the families whose livelihoods he had decimated. He saw the cold, efficient destruction he had orchestrated under the guise of progress. Revenge would not restore their fields. It would only validate the moral rot that had brought him here. With a shuddering gasp, Elijah lowered the phone, the planned explosion reduced to a quiet click. He would pay the debt, not multiply the damage. The process began the next morning. It was not a mandated surrender, but an aggressive self-immolation. He signed away the patents, the brilliant proprietary algorithms that were the core IP of Vance Dynamics, for pennies on the dollar to a rival firm. The physical assets, the sprawling campus, the remaining cash reserves, all liquidated. Every signature was a surgical removal of his former identity, a necessary amputation of the hubris that had nearly killed him. The lawyers, the bankers, and the media watched in silent astonishment as Elijah insisted on a complete, full repayment of every single debt owed, down to the smallest outstanding invoice from the smallest independent farm. When the final wire transfer completed, settling the last minute obligation, Vance Dynamics ceased to exist. Elijah Vance was solvent in the eyes of the law, but utterly bankrupt in every other metric of modern success.